Yo, welcome back to another episode of the most authentic and nuanced holistic health and fitness podcast, hosted by your favorite crunchy strength and conditioning coach. I'm Kelsey Moore, and today's company is the one and only Shawna Holman. She is a wife, mom, and friend, and is the founder of A Little Less Toxic and best-selling author of A Healthier Home. She shares through social media, her book, and website simple strategies, education, and tips for helping make our homes and loves a little less toxic, one day, one meal, one product at a time. You are amazing. You have been on so many different podcasts. You are an author. You are so well-rounded. I think people know you for your humor and for your tips that you put on your social media. And there is always an initiation story that everyone has when working into this holistic space. I have personally heard it, but I don't think that you can share it enough. So why don't you start off today just telling us how you got into the A Little Less Toxic realm?
I always share that I didn't grow up crunchy just because I was definitely a product of the 80s and 90s, and everything was, we had a very conventional life with products and food and all the things, but I was, for the most part, from anything you could tell from looking at me or on paper, very healthy. I had good energy, I was great. I from the outside, looked very healthy, and on the inside, I didn't feel anything otherwise. And it wasn't until probably in my late teens, and I had gone through some significant trauma, and that all plays a role too. But in my late teens, I started, I got acne, and I started having what was going on with that. And in my early 20s, the heart palpitations were there. And what else? I was getting joint pain and some other things, but I just kept brushing it off as though it were normal, some capacity, or just something that I had to live with. And then I had all the same stuff going on, and then I got what I thought was a sinus infection, and it got pretty bad. So I went to the little clinic there on campus, and they gave me, of course, and it did clear it up or take care of it, but then it came back, and the rinse repeat. I kind of did the same thing a few times, and the pain that I was having, we never was a sinus infection or a migraine. So I saw different ear, nose, throat specialists, neurologists, allergists. I was going to everyone. Like, is this an allergy issue? I did surgery to try and clear my nasal pain, becoming more frequent and just really harder to navigate and live my life around. And nothing was working. And I just was being passed from doctor to doctor. And in the meantime, I was getting sicker. And I didn't know that. I just knew that the headaches were getting worse and closer together. And of those 5 years, in the last year, I was not pain-free one moment of any day for a solid year. And this is post-surgery and all the things too. And there were times when I would just try and tough it out as long as I could. And then there were times I would go back to the doctor and end up on antibiotics and steroids. And on the last time that I was on antibiotics and steroids trying to get some relief, I had a little hangnail, and I was washing a dish. And as soon as I was done washing the dish, I could feel that it was a little infected, which that in some capacity before we're like, oh, that is more tender than it should be, or it's a little warm to the touch or red. And it kind of set off an alarm. But I cleaned it really well, and I bandaged it, and it was bedtime. And I let my husband know that it was throbbing and pulsating at this point, all up until the point that I fell asleep. And when I got up in the morning, it was no longer pulsating and it hurt anymore. So I thought, okay, that's good. But then I noticed a pain in my underarm on the same side. And a little while was a tiny tender point on my forearm on the same side. And then the alarm went off again that there's 1-2 spots on the same arm that feel like something's going on. And the next, like a long story kind of short, I ended up in urgent care, more antibiotics, and it didn't take care of it, and it spread. So I ended up in the emergency room, and I had tachycardia, I had MRSA and sepsis, which means I had a blood infection with a strain of bacteria, staph bacteria, that is antibiotics, and it was throughout my system. So I ended up on a week of IV antibiotics, strongest kind that they have, so that it could try and combat this infection, and then a month of oral antibiotics after that. And I was in danger of losing my life. And I was, by this point, I've been 5 years of these headaches, and now it's to the point where my body is weak, and even while I'm on IV antibiotics and a month of antibiotics after that, the headache never went away. Nothing was touching this thing anymore. So while I was scared for my life, and I've got like a port in my arm so that I can get my infusions of antibiotics every day, I started trying to find other ways to cope with this head. I'll either live with this headache or find another way to manage. I'm not going to be doing this antibiotic thing anymore. Like I can't live like I'm going to die. So in the meantime, my mom ended up seeing, I think it was on PBS, my mom saw some nutritionist talking about inflammation. And, if you have chronic inflammation, it might look like, this list, a laundry list of probably 3/4 or more of what this is. And I don't need antibiotics, I need lifestyle change. And so I did an elimination, removed some things that were suggested by a nutritionist in her book. It's the Virgin Diet for anyone who's curious. It was my launch into this whole world. JJ Virgin is the author of that. And I eliminated some of these that can be healthy for people, but can cause inflammation, especially if they're not good quality. But anyway, within, I want to say days, it might have been a week or two, but it was a handful of days. I was finally pain-free for the first time in over a year. And the pain did not completely gone. And it was just by changing a few of the things that I ate and paying attention to ingredients. And it kind of blew my mind open so that I had no idea. Now I'm looking at ingredients on what I'm eating, but it made me think about the ingredients in everything and what these common things that I thought were healthy, front marketing and thinking I'm doing something healthy for my body was actually killing me in a way. It was making me susceptible to a tiny little bacteria that a healthy person could just completely tolerate, be resilient to, and I would hide. So anyway, it kind of opened up my mind and eyes to ingredients. It was in 2013, and it's been a lot of slow and steady changes along the way. Some bigger changes and seem insignificant, but they add up with others. But yeah, that's my intro story, and it was just so life altering and eye opening that I couldn't stop talking to people. Everyone in my life has some chronic inflammation to some degree, especially back then. None of us knew this stuff. Everyone, that thing, change these things and it can help. And I've just been doing that ever since because I've seen change in my life and in people around me. And then eventually I started sharing it publicly too.
Yeah, that's my next question is just like, how did you start your Instagram? It sounds like it was very natural, organic growth that you had on social media. But can you talk a little bit about your passion behind wanting to grow your Instagram and then that leading to you writing your book?
Yeah. So it was in 2018 when I made a public, and between that point, between 2013 and 2018, like I said, I'm sharing with everyone I know and little things that I learn along the way. Like I start making my own homemade cleaning products or whatever, what lies the food industry is telling us. I'm trying not to annoy my Facebook and Instagram friends that are people that I knew in high school or like old coworkers and things, but still wanting to share these things because I know people. And some of my friends and family members kept pushing me, you need to make a blog, you need to do something, because these little tips and tricks I was sharing, they found really helpful. And I thought they were full of it. I'm like, no one wants to hear all of this. And I don't know how to do a blog. I don't have time for these things. And I had my first child in 2015 also. So I'm like, and we had 2 kids kind of back, like 2 under 2. My plate is full. And so now I am at home and I'm trying to share things from my little 4 walls with my hands very full with these 2 little ones. And I don't know what caused to eventually make the public page, but I started thinking maybe I do want to share this more freely. So the people that are following me, my friends and that want to know more about this stuff, we have a place where I can just talk about it as much as I want to. And I'll leave my personal Instagram and Facebook for, my friends and family that aren't really into that, but want to still see what's going on with my life. So I created a public Instagram page in late 2018. And it turns out that a lot of people want to know more about this stuff. And that was very exciting and encouraging, but also very overwhelming because I never wanted to grow following. I never set out for any of this. I'm very, very thankful for it, but it's also just not what I my plan was. It was God's plan. It was not my plan. So I'm trying to just steward it really well. But yeah, when I think it was at one point I hit like 4,000 followers. I really think it was 4,000. Encouraged and also horrified. I wanted to throw my phone off of the pier into the ocean. I would like go to the store and like it was a very weird experience to have 4,000 people, like many of which I never have met. Some live across the country. And it was very unsettling, but I put this in my hands and I want to steward it well. He gave me a story for a purpose and I want to use it to help other people. And that's just what I've continued to try and do to the best of my ability. I do it when I teach about living less toxic too, is with our hands open, and we can get into this later, but I didn't want to like cling like death grip to this platform or like throw it up in the air either, because I'm overwhelmed. So I go wherever God leads me and hope that it's helping someone.
Well, Shawna, you're certainly helping more than just one person. That's for sure. Your platform, I hate using the word platform because it kind of feels like social media ick, but at the same time, like your platform really is incredible. And I think the reason why people are drawn to your authenticity is because you are incredibly gracious and you portray that within your authenticity on your stories, and the way that you're like, oh my gosh, like you're genuinely blown away about like how God is using you and equipping you for such a large audience. I think truly that is why people are drawn to you. And I want to get into that a little bit in a second. But my next question I have for you, I want to ask anybody with a larger following. I am genuinely curious. Little backstory. I personally have found that the more I speak about non-toxic living, or the more I express countercultural ideas on my public social media page, sometimes it kind of like weirdly affects my personal relationships in real life. I can tend to feel like when people meet me, like if it's a friend of a friend and they meet me, they're immediately like apologizing, like, well, I don't live like you do, or I don't eat like you do, I don't exercise like you do. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that drives me crazy, because I feel like I'm making people feel more guilty or more apologetic towards me, where I'm like, I'm not your standard. Like, live within your own personal convictions. So did you have that growing and kind of pain period at the beginning where people in your real life started to feel out of their own convictions a distance from you? Or was it the opposite? Were people just genuinely drawn to your ideas? I'm thoroughly curious.
Yeah, I feel like yes and no. And I'm kind of unpack that while you're talking, but I think maybe because what I've done from the beginning and try to do now is I feel like I'm talking to a friend, because number one, my mom, my best friends, they watch my stories. They're who I'm talking to predominantly, because I know they're going to buy the things I share about. They're going to try the things that I do, my friends. And I also know that they're in their own seasons of life, or they have their own different understanding or circumstances. So I do try and speak as though I'm talking to them, because I am. So I think it might be received that way in some capacity. I don't ever want to feel like I'm holding this up and talking to, 200,000 people, their side of this device in my hand, because that's who I am. And so I do try and communicate that way. And there's still always this. I was out for a birthday party last weekend, and one of the people there was going to buy her this scented room spray, and then I thought of Shawna's not gonna like her. And I'm like, I'm not your standard, and everyone is on their own journey. And live like me last year, and 10 years before this, I didn't live like me. Now it's a journey, and I think because I do try and communicate that often and regularly, that I hope it takes some of that undue pressure off of people. It's not performative. I'm living this way because it makes me feel better. And I feel like too, and I share it because I hope it can help you too. But it's like I tell my kids at the kitchen table, take what you like, leave what you don't. No pressure. I'm serving it and you can take it or leave it. But yeah, there is some of that. There is some of that where people might be worried that I might be judging them or something, or maybe they're just self when I'm around. But it hasn't really affected relationships in a capacity that I'm aware of.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, and again, I think that speaks to like your gracious approach that you have with people, which is quite literally in your name, a little less toxic. It's not just like a strong standard or boundary, like non-toxic, crunchy, holistic, like these very like high bar standards of like what we should be living up to, which when it's written that way can feel like an idol, which we can kind of get into. But when you have this journey approach and when you have your story on the forefront of your motives, it gives people a better picture that like you're human, you're absolutely human. And if you don't mind sharing, are there areas of your life, like I know you're on a journey, I'm on a journey, what particular part of your non-toxic or journey living are you still working on? Would love to know that.
Yeah, I want to give you like good, but there are things I've talked to some people before, and they're like, I've completely swapped. I am like totally non-toxic, and I'm like, but are you? Because sometimes my phone in bed, as you know, sometimes we like have blue light in our eyes like too long in the day. There are things that, like you said, you know, the non-toxic standard. I feel like it doesn't exist. I feel like this side of heaven, there is never there's an amount of toxicity with not just like ingredients and products, but in our environment, but also in, you know, our thoughts and our behaviors and things too. And I not so less toxic behaviors and thought patterns. And those are probably the hardest things that I struggle with, you know, like get out of bed early so you can read your Bible and exercise, lady. You know, like I'm just snuggling. You know, like, or just go to sleep. And I'm like, no, I just need to answer 20 more DMs in my bed. Like, really the hardest things for me personally. Yeah. Well, yeah, I might think of other examples as we're talking. But yeah, I don't live like any kind of perfect. If we go out to eat, I'm not like, oh no, seed oils. You know, if I have if we're like going to a hole in the wall Mexican joint, I am gonna get enchiladas with their canned sauce. I don't, and I will be so happy to eat 20 baskets of chips. I'm fine, good.
Yep. Totally understand. Totally get it. So you mentioned the word stewardship earlier, and I personally really resonate with that type of living and that outlook. And I think, especially as believers and as Christians, once we understand that God has given us insane responsibility for cultivating our land, stewarding our children, teaching them, growing them up, you know, producing food to care for our family. We have the ability to bring peace into our home. Like it's much more. And I always say this, I'm not a mom yet, but I always say like, if you're a stay-at-home mom or if you are a working mom, whatever the case is, once you realize like our job is to steward, like that should light a fire under your rear end. It's like, dang, that's actually a lot of responsibility. Like we should take that with so much seriousness. And, once you realize that there's all these areas you can steward, then it almost motivates you to read the books, to learn the new things. And then it also takes some grace and a relationship with Christ to understand like, okay, we can't make this our idol, but we need to continue to cultivate that. So can you speak a little bit to that stewardship that you're always wanting to resonate or you know, show to your audience?
Yeah. Yeah, I go back to that hand example I was talking about. It was kind of a pivotal moment for me when that like 4,000 follower thing, when I put my hands out, like you put this in my, it is my responsibility to carry it, but that doesn't mean I carry it alone. And it also white knuckle it, afraid that I'm going to lose this platform or like make the wrong. And I also don't throw up my hands in overwhelm, right? I think about think about them at least every day, but lots of times, multiple times a day. And I tell people, one has things that we are assigned to in our life, right? God put certain things in your hands, and it might be the job that you work, you know, the relationships that you have, whether it's, you know, a parent-child relationship, like you're a daughter, a sister, a friend, a wife, that you wear, like that God gave to you, they are yours with his help. And one thing that I think we don't often think about is our actual physical bodies, that they have been put into my hands. We take them for granted. It is. It's something that is, but it's actually God gave me this physical vessel, and I believe that he expects me to care for it. And caring for it well does not mean living in an extreme where I white knuckle and I'm afraid of seed oils and I'm afraid of toxins, or but it also does not mean that I'm throwing my hands up in the air and going like, well, we can't avoid the toxins anyway, so I'm just gonna, and or the, oh, well, I'm gonna die anyway, so I'll just eat all the whatever. Like, I believe that it is our duty and responsibility to view it word. My body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. Why would I trash that? And I think that it's our duty and responsibility, and it's something that we need to manage with reverence, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I do think about it, I have like some like current like personal convictions, like when I'm always talking about exercise and like the temple that God has given us. God could have chosen anything. We see in the Old Testament, God chose the Ark of the Covenant to house his presence. But after Jesus came, died on the cross, rose again, what did he choose to house his presence? Us. Like our physical bodies carry the Imago Dei, like a picture of God himself. And I totally agree with you that it's not just like, well, it's all or nothing. It's like, no. Like, when did we start believing we could be perfect? Like, that is quite literally why Jesus came, is we cannot be perfect. And we have to continue to, not only in our spiritual lives, continue to get refined and become more like Christ, but in our physical world, we should continue, and we should have this motivation to continue to make our temple cleaner, healthier. Why? So that we can go and love others more efficiently and more effectively, and I feel so passionately about that because, even like a simple example, right? Like, why should we be healthy? I can always give this example of, are you healthy enough to maybe like go on a missions trip? Can you go work at a local soup kitchen? Do you have the ability to like be healthy enough to go serve at your church? And if the answer is no, I recognize everyone has different health issues or whatever the case is. But if you can kind of zoom out and say, oh, I'm not healthy enough to do that. It's like, well, maybe we should be asking the question of, that is the reason why we should be taking care of ourselves, so that we can take care of our children efficiently and effectively, so we can love others more, we can serve others more, rather than just like this personal idolizing of a clean, crunchy, holistic life. And I love that we're on the same page with that. Did you have anything else to add to that?
Oh, a ton. I mean, I could talk about that forever, but I was thinking, that sometimes that one of those things that we have to steward is illness or affliction, right? That might be God ordained for a season or for a lifetime. And it doesn't mean that if you have an illness or affliction that you can't do anything about, that you can't serve. Of course, God has called you to that mission field, right? But if there is I have self-inflicted or allowed, whether knowingly or not, that can stand in my way of living, loving, and serving well. And in my case, it was those headaches that I were crippling in some capacity. Of course, I still went to work and I did all of the things and I still showed up for my friends, not in a way that I could have. And so this stewardship of my physical, mental, emotional health is also, it's for that, because it's not just about me feeling better. Feeling better allows me to show up to me in a way that is just so much more full and able and capable, and being able to enjoy that too. God didn't want me to trudge through,
Totally. Yeah, totally agree. I'm glad that you hit on that. Okay, let's go into a little bit more like just like simple questions here. But first of all, I scoured your website the past couple of days, which you have a phenomenal website. I'm going to plug it really quick. You have like an insane database, even outside of your book. You have an insane database for personal care products, home products. Like, everyone's always asking me, like, what body wash do you recommend, or shampoo, or house cleaning supplies, whatever. If you have a question about that, go to Shawna's website, because you have like an insane database on there with all of your discount codes. But if you could pick like an area in your life that's probably the easiest for somebody new and they're just getting started, their eyes are just unveiled. I'm like, oh my gosh, everything in my life is full of chemicals and is trying to kill me. What thing do you believe should be started with? Some people believe start with personal care products. Some people believe like more like universal products like water filters and air purifiers. But in your opinion, would love to hear maybe a step-by-step approach on how you eliminate or substitute those things in your life.
Yeah, I think that it's important to consider frequency and proximity. So we very often, and things that are closer in contact with our body, that's a great place to start. I started with food, and it's generally the place that I think anyone can start and maybe should start, because all of us are going to eat multiple times a day, every single day. And not only that, so that's the frequency, right? But the proximity, the things that we're consuming, beverages and food are going actually into our body, and they are fueling us or maybe impeding. Or I think that can be a simple way to start, but it's not always easy. But it also, I think that we can simplify our approach to that so that it is less overwhelming. So I try and think of some really simple ways that people can start. If you've never considered toxic living at all, or you're like, oh, this chronic thing sounds like it could be something I'm dealing with, like, where do I even begin? You don't have to start with an elimination diet like I did. I do recommend it. I feel like really, really helpful being my own science experiment. I mean, I had done the allergy testing and I wasn't allergic of these things, but when I pulled them out and felt better and then added them back in to see how my body reacted, it gave me a really what's it called? Like a in time and about, but I looked to see what it was doing to me. I didn't need to see it on a piece of paper. I could feel and know this is not working well for my body. It doesn't have to be that complicated. It can be as simple as I am no longer going to buy things in it that have artificial flavors. That's it. Like right there. No dyes, no artificial flavors. And that is already going to know your options at the store a ton. And you're going to be instantly eating things and fueling yourself with things that are, and then if you want to take it another step, maybe you stop buying anything that has natural flavor in it too, and ingredients are. And at some point you're only buying things that are, you either make it yourself, and if it's packaged, it's going to have ingredients that you recognize and things that you have in your own kitchen. And if you want to go even further and start finding ingredients that might not be working now and take them out for a season so that you can continue to heal, you can do that. But I think with any of these things, when we tackle one area or all of the areas at once, it's important to do it in a way that is attainable and sustainable. You need to be able to actually do it. If it's too overwhelming, too intense, I'm not going to be able to see it through. So whatever you do decide to try to do it in a way that is reasonable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I first got started, my personal initiation story generally is that I had negative side effects to taking hormonal birth control. And I had basically like 4 times the amount of copper like in my system that I needed to, because I couldn't excrete heavy metals appropriately from the birth control. And I had no idea, right? Like I didn't know anything, that was the only option I was given when I got married. But once again, that veil was lifted and realized, oh my goodness, there are so many things I can change and adjust. I just started changing one product or one thing every month. And I put the most exciting things for me on the front end of it so that I felt really motivated. And then I would personally say within the last 6 months, I got the air doctors, which are a little bit more of a bigger investment. I know that you're a huge fan of air doctors. I think one of the first things I got was a Berkey water filter. I started working on my body wash. And so, like you said, that kind of falls within the frequency and proximity idea, which is really cool. Another thing I kind of wanted to point out is I think once you start learning more about food, and what I don't mean is like diet culture, I mean like genuinely like how does food respond to our body? You maybe start thinking about where your food is produced. Then you start thinking about the farmers and you think about regenerative farming, and you realize that humans are like the only species of animal that basically like argues about food styles, argues about diets. Every other animal, we know like their general habitat. We know that they probably need sun. We know that they need so many minerals, vitamins and minerals in order to reproduce. Like chickens need so many vitamins and minerals in order to lay an egg every day. Like we know these concepts about food for other animals, but we as humans have such a hard time applying that to ourselves. And so I love your approach, especially on your Instagram when you make, your videos in your kitchen. It's about simplifying it, and you're focusing so much more on the skills of cooking real food. And can you talk about your journey of learning how to just cook and prepare food? Because I think once you learn those traditional skills in the kitchen, food is not as intimidating personally. Can you talk about your journey there?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it shouldn't be intimidating. You kind of made me realize something right now I never really considered before. I think that as humans, we have this propensity to either, well, I see it a lot because I communicate with, a lot of people online now, and there seems to be kind of two ends of the spectrum where we like want someone else to make the decisions for us, like somebody else do the thinking for me, tell me what to buy. And then there's another extreme where it's like everything, it needs to be balanced. We need to be able to make decisions for ourselves based out of wisdom and discernment and knowledge, and also not make it control and overtake our life with all of the products, and a lot with food, like what you're talking about with like some of the diet culture and some of the extremes there too. And I do think that there can be a season for those different things, whether it might be like the GAPS diet or keto, or keto, I never know what to say that, or things like that might be appropriate for a season. They are not sustainable because of that. That's one big reason why I don't think that it is a good idea to try and latch yourself onto that forever, when we can just get to basics and fuel ourselves the way that God intended. So I mostly, like I said, I grew up very conventionally. I had some significant trauma in our household. My mom, and keep a roof over her head, she was not home cooking a lot. My mom is one of the best cooks that I know. I'm so fortunate to get to eat her home cooking now, but when I was growing up, that wasn't the case. We were surviving, right? So I learned to cook by literally, I was obsessed with the Food Network. Like I watched, it was like Rachel Ray, Bobby Flay, Emerald. I watched all of their shows. It was like Friends or the Food Network, and that was pretty much it for a good season of my life as a young adult. And when we got married, Ashton was like, we're not going to have cable. Like, we're just not going to do that. And I'm like, but the Food Network, I was just so devastated to not have the Food Network. We haven't had cable since. But watching those people, and then by just starting to do things in my own kitchen, and out of necessity, because I loved all of those conventional things. I would eat fast food multiple times a week, sometimes every single day. Loved packaged foods. And when I had the switch, because it was a survival thing, necessity to that, but there was also this necessity of like, I want to enjoy what I'm eating. I want to make those things, but I want to make them in a way that doesn't make me sick. So I just started experimenting in the kitchen with things, like, oh, I could have survived on Crunch Wraps. So of course, things like that. We store top ramen like on the regular, my husband and I, but we would make it, we called it Damien Rahman, because he's Damien, and we'd add vegetables to it because we're so healthy, and this is the way we did things. I can't eat that anymore, but why not? Let's make it with foods that make me feel good, but I want it to still taste good too. So there's a bit of a transition there to unlock my taste buds from the grips of the food industry that had been controlling them for so long, where real food, manufactured food, but it didn't take long. It was like 2 weeks, 3 weeks before I was like, this almond tastes like dessert. I was so excited to find out that real food tastes good. No, I couldn't enjoy it when I was in the grips of this lab manufactured nonsense, right? So there was that, and then it was just a bit of kitchen. And what I would do from the very beginning, if I made a meal that we both thought was that one was really good, I want to make that again, I would immediately type it up and print it out, and I would put it in a protector in a 3-ring binder and keep it in my kitchen. I still have the 3-ring binder in my kitchen. But what happened Instagram, I stopped printing them and putting them in the binder. I have to like go on my own Instagram, like, how did I make that again? And then I would repeat that way, and then just experimenting along the way. But like kitchen principles for, you know, like sauteing, or you just really big watching people like Bobby Flay and Rachel Ray and someone else that rhymes with them.
Yeah. They're all the same. Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah, see? Emerald Lagasse.
Exactly. You just figure it out, you know? But that's kind of what I say too. You know, I will never claim that I'm a good cook. Lord knows, and my husband knows I'm not a good cook. Like, it's just not something that comes natural to me. But in my own personal life, if I am going to talk about and feel convicted about taking back responsibility for these things in my life, that is an area. My kitchen is an absolute area that I need to steward. And my New Year's resolution this year is to do my dishes every single night, which seems like a no-brainer for the average human being, but that was revolutionary for me. And now I'm like, oh, maybe I should go sharpen my knives. Let me look up on YouTube how to sharpen my knives, you know, and that it's just surprising how much peace that brings into the rhythms of your kitchen. And again, I don't even have kids yet. So I'm really trying to personally work on those things. And I'm going to rev you up, Shawna. I have learned so much, especially you're the Instapot goddess, okay? I have learned so much about the Instapot than I would have ever imagined, really, from your Instagram. So I know that you do talk a lot about personal care products. You talk about, you know, food. Obviously, it's like a huge conviction for you. But in regards to those skills, like you make it very accessible to the average woman on Instagram.
Thank you. That really means the world to me. Thank you. Thank you. I feel like we don't have the Food Network anymore. We also don't have the privilege of like growing up around our grandmas and different moms in the community and learning skills from them. But if we can use social media for some good, maybe it can be that we learn those kinds of homemaking and homekeeping skills. I love watching people do stuff like that. I don't make sourdough. I don't know all the things everyone else does, but I like, even if I don't use all of their teaching and technique and strategy for whatever they're doing, I glean to sharpen me and build my skills in different areas. So I hope to be able to do that too. Mostly I just feel like, okay, I'll show everyone what I'm cooking and maybe it'll give someone an idea, because I like watching other people's meals too. But that's really encouraging to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. I think most women obviously got their skills for stewarding their home and their kitchen and their food from the older generations. But I think now, you know, my generation, your generation, we're recognizing that our moms and grandmas were probably in the workforce. They probably were not the quote unquote traditional, whatever you define traditional homemaking or homemaker would be, just because of the turn in the Industrial Revolution with America, which is a much larger topic. But we do see this massive educational gap. And granted, a lot of women now are realizing, oh my gosh, I need to learn all of these skills. And that obviously will always go to an extreme. But I do think more of this trend of like this crunchy, holistic lifestyle is enlightening more women on how positive it can be to take back your kitchen, and not in some weird way, but
right, yeah, not to be extreme or, you know, some kind of trend. I want it to be here to stay. You know, there's like I'm thinking of like a pendulum and women's lib movement, you know, like all this stuff, and we've lost a lot of those really basic skills, and we've compromised a lot of our health because of it. And so I think the pendulum is swinging back some, and hopefully, I mean, there's a whole other like extreme to that too. And we don't have to live in either extreme. We can make it make sense for us. I always tell people, do what you can with what you're able and as it makes sense for you. And the way I run, like anyone else, but you can find ways to make your home and lives less toxic too. And it doesn't have to break your bank. It doesn't have to overwhelm you. And it really shouldn't, because if you're doing it that way, then it's not going to last. And that is great.
absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about you writing your book. So, how did you get how did you get the opportunity? Did you just start writing? Were you approached to write a book? You're a best-selling author. Can you talk to that? I think everyone is always curious like how that goes about, and we're just like rooting you on from afar, like on the internet, but I have no idea what that even looks like to write a book. Can you give us some background?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know how this works for other people. I can just share my experience. And okay, get emails every day, right, asking for different things. And so, a lot of times they're things I would never try, and sometimes they're offers for different things. So I had this email in my inbox for a while, and one of my best friends, Amy, helps me manage like the email website. Kept seeing this email in there, and she's like, "You need to respond to this." It was about a book. It was like, "We're from so and so publisher." I'm like, "Yeah, sure you are." Yeah, I thought it was spam. I wasn't going to respond to it, but I didn't delete it either, just in case, but I finally did respond, and had a phone conversation. I'm like, I think this is real. But I an engaged audience. There's a large number of people there, so I'm sure they're like, okay, maybe this person would make a good deal. I just took literally everything I've ever shared on Instagram before in regards to making your home less toxic, and then organized it into a room by room guide. I mean, my stories, print all my posts, go on my website. I just shared, and then I tried to put it all together in a concise but comprehensive fashion, and look up the most current, and it includes sources and things like that and other references. And I just put it all together as best I could. And I had to fit within a certain, I didn't know this about books, and this might be fascinating for somebody listening. They have to be made in 16-page increments. I didn't know that. Find them. It's like 8 pages over here, 8 pages over here. So it's always something I didn't know. So if you go over that allotment, stuff's going to get cut, or if you're under, you got to add stuff. I never experience of not having enough to talk about. So I had to come in there, but that's basically how it went. And then I would sit, you get the proposal, and there's all these different meetings and stuff, and then you give your idea. I had several ideas for the first book. They're like, what do you want to write about? And I'm like, well, everyone wants a cookbook. And they're like, you're not really like a food blogger. I'm like, yeah, but people want my recipes, And then so I tossed around. I thought so. I'm just trying to give the people what they want, but they're like, let's not do that. But they like the idea for this. I was gonna call it a little less toxic, or home, or something like that, but they're like, toxic's not great in book titles. Doesn't sell that well or something. I don't know. Just tell me what to do. Here's the info. But so we came up with a healthier home, and it's a room by room guide that will literally take you room by room of your house, but it is not supposed to overwhelm it to a cookbook in a way where you're like, I need a recipe for dinner and I have beef. And then you turn in your cookbook to the beef section and you find something, and what you have, you make it. It's, man, it's time to replace my rugs, or I don't really care for my shampoo ingredients anymore, but I next, or, oh, I need new pots and pans, whatever it might be. You just turn to that section of the book, and there will be a comprehensive but concise. I don't want to overwhelm any in a chapter or section containing that information, so that you can be informed decision within your budget to meet your needs and to do. That was my goal. So I feel like I did a good job of that.
You absolutely did. That is just so interesting. And to think about you pulling all of your information off of Instagram feels so overwhelming just to talk about. How long did it take you to write and put together?
It was crazy. Well, deadlines. So if it would have been up to me, like if I would have approached a publisher like, hey, I have a book, here you go, I would have never, it would have taken me, it literally, I never felt like it was good enough or had enough, just kept adding to it and never approached anyone. But because it was a publisher approaching me and I had deadlines that I had to meet, it was really a whirlwind. I think I signed a contract, and maybe it's hard to really capture too, because there was so much going on in my contract in like September. And right then my mom went through an incredible health crisis where she went through months of this horrific experience, and she ended up losing one of her eyes during this time. it was so stressful, and there was just like trying to be available, not really being able to give attention to the book. So I collected all the information, but to sit down and write it, I probably did that in a little over, I want to say like 2 months. And and then you get the manuscript off. It was insane. And I'm a homeschooling mom trying to run this business. I didn't have this whole situation, still show up online and be available and be a wife and a friend and all these things in the meantime. So I, and really just like 2 afternoons a week when my in-laws, my Damien's parents or his twins, and I would just have like 3 hours to and I would do that a week until I got all of the written information pulled together. And then we had 3 long photo shoot days, a photo heavy book. And yeah, and then there's, the revisions and the layout and this and that, but that happens in these like kind of concentrated spurts where it's like, okay, the layout edits and improve this. And then I'm like, oh gosh, so it's kind of like what I was getting into. And I had to learn a lot along the way, but it was very cool. It was very, very cool. The coolest part is that I got to put this information and my tips and tricks. I mean, I even put like the duvet cover hack in there, just so many things. And I got to put them in a book that will live on beyond me. And the main reason I ended up deciding to write it was like, mommy's tips and tricks are going to live in this physical book that my kids can own and use to make their own homes healthier when they leave my house one day. And if it can help other people along the way too, is anyone even going to buy this? I don't know, but at least my kids will have it. And I didn't, like, somebody approached me to make it happen. It was a very big blessing, and it's done very well. So that's cool too.
It really has. It's just incredible. I had like a very, like, compared to getting a real book like photo shoot or brand photo shoot done, I can't even imagine, but I had a smaller brand photo shoot last weekend. And just the organization to do something locally felt crazy to me. So I literally can't imagine trying to organize photos for a book that's going to be like on Amazon and in thousands of people's homes. Like,
I couldn't do it without Amy. And she's my right hand, everything. And I wouldn't have even attempted it without her. Having people in your life that get your and want to support it and support you is crucial. But yeah.
This may be kind of like an offhand, like spicy question, but one thing that I think about if I had like a physical book that I wrote is I'm always learning and adapting and my mind is always growing. So is there anything in the Healthier Home book that you have not necessarily changed your mind on, but wish maybe you would have adjusted or rephrased or added? I would love to know if, since it's been published, you've been like, oh, I wish I would have expanded on this within the book, or not so much.
There's not been a single thing yet, but that doesn't mean there won't be. I mean, like I said, I always have more I can talk about. So there's other things that I'm not like, oh, I wish this were in here too. But there's always more I can say. But I did try and approach everything with, that word nuance gets used too much, but to leave it open where these are my recommendations, use this as a guide and make it make sense for you. And I feel like that's the best it's going to be. And I feel really good about it. Yeah, there hasn't yet where I'm like, I should have said this, or, oh, I forgot to include that. Nothing like that yet. And over a year, so I guess.
Are you working on any projects right now? I mean, you said it's kind of been a year since you published that. So is there anything in the works?
This is airing in a few days, right? So in a few days from now, I'm expecting the green light. So I will tell you, and hopefully it all works out. God's got it under control. But the cookbook is going to be a reality, and it will be available for pre-order by the time this. Yeah.
That is incredible. Look at me making a joke about people wanting your recipes, and you're really doing it. That's amazing.
Well, it even happened with book 2. I'll probably share this story too, but they're like, okay, this book did great. You better start thinking about book 2. No pressure, but let's do it, and I'm like, cookbook. And they're like, and I'm like, listen to me. It's what the people want. And I went into my DM search cookbook, and I quickly screenshot over 100 screenshots, sent it to my publisher, and I'm like, just look, and like, we're doing this. I'm like, I did my last business. I wouldn't have a book 1 if it, and we are making it. So I'm going to cry. I made it. It is, I just finished up some layout edits today, right before I got on this call with you. And a healthier home cook will be available for pre-order as this airs. And it's 70 recipes that are my family favorite recipes. We have all the time that so many people from the Little Less Toxic community have made over and over and over. And I know their favorites too. And we're going to have an easier way to access those recipes and all my kitchen tips and tricks and recommendations to the materials that we use. It's so excited.
That is awesome. No more having to find your hashtags. ALLT hashtag something that we want to find of you. You know, we're going to have it in paper in our kitchens here.
Even that, I was so frustrated that Instagram took those hashtags away because most of my, you click them and you can't find the things. They just eliminated that a couple of months ago when I was thick of writing this book, but I was like, praise you, God. I would have been like devastated that people couldn't find those easier, but now they will be able to because, and I have measured things. All my recipes online before were just like, what in the world am I talking about? I had to take all of my recipes and actually measure them, make them multiple times, make all of my family taste test it and refine them. And they are worth publishing now. And I'm very, very excited to get them into everyone's hands.
That is so exciting. Congratulations. Look at me, like talking about you in the kitchen and how you've kind of been that, you know, quote unquote grandmother teaching us these skills. I didn't even know about your cookbook. It's perfect timing.
I think I told you in an email, I'm like, I cannot believe this podcast is going to publish week of the announcement because I would have been like sitting here biting my tongue because I haven't been allowed to talk about it. I have to wait until things are wrapped up. But next week, so hopefully this time's out right. And if not, then you guys got the early scoop, but it's happening.
I know when you put up your cryptic Instagram story last night, I was like, she's going to tell me tomorrow. I just got to be patient.
You are the first to know.
I feel so honored. Shawna, if someone doesn't already follow you, they're literally living under a rock, but where can people find you and how can we support you?
Thank you. I'm a little less toxic everywhere. I'm in real life too, I hope. www.littlelesstoxic.com. I'm a little less toxic Facebook, although I predominantly show up on it. And my website is always updated. And like you said, I do try and they're my own personal favorites. I know a lot of people will vet things and just put like all of the things that meet their requirements. And I love that too. I just only put things that I actually have purchased and use and love, that I can personally vouch for and recommend because I'm recommending to my mom and my best friends anyway, right? So yeah, my website and Instagram are probably going to be your safest bet for finding up-to-date current things and all of my shenanigans because it's a lot of nonsense.
I love it. You're authentic, you're genuine, and I think that's why people love you and are gravitating towards you. I know that you have such a humble spirit, but on the air, I want to tell you and I want to encourage you to keep going. You know, the Lord will equip you as you go. And I want to give you that backbone of steel because people are listening and you are carrying a conversation that people need to be talking about. So go get them, girl. I am so glad we were able to have this conversation today.
I love you. Yes, so much for having me. What a delight.